When the season ended last year, we all agreed the Bengals need secondary help. When free agency got here, we looked at the list of players that could potentially be had and discussed various fits, how it might work in Cincinnati, how this player was a better option than a guy like Geno Stone, or a better player than what they had last year in Von Bell, or could maybe complement what Jordan Battle and Geno Stone could bring to the table. Like, that was a thing back in March. Bengals didn't address it. The draft. I mean, we get on this show every year in March and April, probably a dozen, if not more, draft experts. And we talk about different possibilities and different players. And to be honest, one of the players we talked about a lot was Shamar Stewart. But we get on every single one of these draft experts, and almost every single time we talked about possible safeties. Safeties that could be had in round one, or safeties that would make sense on day two if you don't take one in round one. Evaluations of each one of those players differed. The Bengals didn't even take one. Maybe for good reason. No knock on the players they chose. You're being completely reasonable if you go, well, look, had you traded Trey Hendrickson, you would have had more draft picks, and surely one of them could have been used on a safety. That's fine. But coming into the draft, I don't recall anybody who said to me or others, stop wasting your breath on safety because they're not going to take one or they shouldn't take one. Well, they didn't take one. A week and a half ago, understanding that the Bengals' issues at safety were exacerbated, at least in the short term, because of the preseason injury suffered by Tyson Anderson, we talked about options at safety that could pop up based on whether some of those options got cut by other teams. The waiver wire was supposed to reveal this plethora of players in the secondary that the Bengals could add. They added none of them. This plan may work. Al Golden may be a genius when it comes to squeezing more out of guys like Geno Stone and getting more out of guys like Cam Taylor-Britt, Dax Hill, DJ Turner, Josh Newton, Jordan Battle. I know I'm folding cornerbacks into the conversation. I'm not sure cornerback was ever viewed as a pressing need as safety was, but certainly we talked about cornerback options. If you're like me, if you're like many, you believe you can never have enough. But between the two position groups, it felt like if there was an area they needed to target in the secondary, it was going to be safety. There were so many mileposts during the offseason where you start to talk about free agency, then the draft, and then maybe even some post-draft free agents. As training camp got closer, we talked about some of the options out there in free agency, players who were still out there, talked about waiver wire possibilities after cutdown day. And every single time, maybe safety wasn't the first position we talked about, but it was one of the positions we talked about. Every single time, the Bengals either passed or missed out on the guy they would have taken. However it went down, they didn't add to that position. If what they're doing pays off, which is we're going to run it back with a lot of guys who helped get Al Golden fired, and they end up having a really good safety room and cornerback play that's better this season with a lot of guys that on the outside we think have some upside, this team can win the whole thing. Al Golden will be hailed as a genius, and the Bengals' overall plan is going to be lauded as one that kind of zigged when everybody else thought they should zag. Obviously, that's the outcome we all hope for. It just feels like a really dangerous approach, and one that has a lot of downside to it. I think you could have run it back with all these players. I don't think you had to cut Geno Stone, yet find a potential replacement. I don't think you had to cut Jordan Battle, yet find a potential replacement. I don't think you had to just overhaul the entire room. It did feel like, though, they could use some more options or some more bodies, or in some cases, outright replacements. So we'll see. If this works, then the Bengals can win the whole thing. If this doesn't work, then I fear that as the season unfolds, we're going to watch the Bengals lose more games that they should win. And that there's going to be more efforts by Joe Burrow that go for naught. And that there's going to be more instances where you watch Bengals games and they show Joe Burrow on the sideline and he looks angry because The Bengals defense, again, let him and the rest of the team down. And I worry that when there are games that could be there for the taking in the fourth quarter, if one play is made, those plays aren't made because of what they haven't done in the secondary. And I fear that what we talked about in January and February and March and April and May and June, July, and August of this year ends up continuing to be something we talk about as the season gets to its dog days of November and down the stretch in December and January.